Warlocks, adored by some, misunderstood by others, and they get their powers from a patron, all-powerful patron, and that's where our subclass comes in. Now, before we get to the subclass, let's actually just look at some more common things that Warlocks get. First of all, I haven't really mentioned this too much in most of my other build videos, but it's worth pointing out that Warlocks are spellcasters, but they do get the same number of hit points as a cleric or rogue would, which is quite nice. So they're a bit more tanky, they can take a few more hits, and they do get light armor proficiency, which other spellcasters don't. Now, whether you consider Warlocks a full spellcaster is kind of up for a bit of debate because their spellcasting works differently. I've seen polls on Reddit, on D&D subreddits, some people agree, some people disagree, but they are definitely casters. Like, they've only got simple weapon proficiency. It's not like they can be wielding weapons, and they don't get many bonuses to melee attacks of any sort. I'll go over their spell slots in more detail later, but one thing I want to point out, one way they're very different, is that the spell slots replenish on a short rest, not a long rest. And as a consequence, they get many fewer spell slots. Anyway, I'll show you that later. So, we get to pick 2 cantrips. And there isn't a huge selection of cantrips to choose from either. Now, the traditional type of Warlock, the main stereotypical type of Warlock, you would take Eldritch Blast, because you're going to be able to augment this blast. One way I've heard Warlocks described, I think quite fittingly, is that Warlocks are kind of like the Magical Martial. A lot of your damage is going to be coming from Eldritch Blast, just like from a Martial class, you're going to be getting your damage from your melee or ranged attacks. Now, you can create Warlocks that don't use Eldritch Blast. That is possible, but it's kind of their whole thing when it comes to how they do most of the damage, like I said. So don't take this at your own risk, effectively. And that leaves one other cantrip to choose. It's not very many. Let's go through the other cantrips. So Blade Ward, I probably wouldn't take this on a Warlock with such a limited number of cantrips, especially when Eldritch Blast is almost like cantrip tax, as it were. Chill Touch is good. Your Eldritch Blast is going to be doing more damage, but Chill Touch does have the nice side effect of stopping enemies from regaining hit points, which is very nice. There's some combats that are much easier if you do have this. Undead also receive disadvantage on attack rolls. That doesn't come up so much in early access during patch 9 when this video was made. Friends is great if you use it at the right time, but do keep in mind that after you use Friends, the person you've used it on might come and accuse you, and you have to pass, basically accusing you of using magic on them because you have. Be careful, some people do get caught out by that. Mage Hand's okay, but it requires concentration and you might be concentrating on something else. Minor Illusion could be good. Poison Spray, I just wouldn't. I know it's got 1d12, but you've got to be getting up close. The enemies have to pass a Constitution saving throw, and most enemies are quite good at that. So Eldritch Blast, one other one. I would often myself either go for Friends or Chill Touch. Don't take True Strike. It's not going to help you. Please don't. Let me get some spells. Choose from also. Now, depending on your subclass, you actually get different sets of spells. So I'm going to start with kind of looking at the Fiend and see which spells we get for the Fiend, and then go to the Great Old One. So as the Fiend, which is, until patch 9 was basically the best subclass, because the other subclass, the Great Old One, the only reason to take it was to get access to a couple of spells. Anyway, the Fiends, when you reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, this gift from your patron grants you 3 temporary hit points. That 3 is equal to your level plus your charisma modifier. So if I actually just, because currently my charisma is +2, my level is 1, so that's 3. Let me just change this. Okay, charisma 17, fine. Come down here now, and it says 4 temporary hit points because my charisma's gone up. And that's kind of nice. It gives you temporary hit points, a tiny bit more survivability, and you will get use out of this. Your Warlock will be making creatures go to 0 hit points. Then we get to pick 2 spells, just 2. And it's a bit like the Bard or Sorcerer. These are spells we always know. We can't switch them out unless we're at the level up screen. The Arm of Agathis is pretty good, but I have had problems with it in patch 9, where when we get to cast it at level 3, it doesn't deal any cold damage. If it did, it's amazing. But yeah, Arm of Agathis can be good. This used to work very well with Blade Ward, because you take half damage and you give out 5 cold damage, you can make enemies wet, and this can be quite a good way of dealing out damage. Arms of Hadar, I think it looks cool. However, it's got a 10-foot radius and only like a 10-foot range, as it were. Well, it's got, yeah, range and radius both 10 feet. And it hurts your allies as well. So it does 2d6 necrotic damage. And then if they fail a strength saving throw, they can't take reactions. The range is just a bit too low. It's not the worst spell or anything, but I find it hard to get good use out of it. Burning Hands, the same as the Wizard spell. That's what it says on the tin, 3d6 fire damage. It's alright. Charm Potion I would avoid. Talked about this in other videos. If you've got the cantrip Friends, then you can just use that during a skill check. And during combat, you're going to stop your Warlock being hit. That's great. There might be a time where that helps. I'm sure someone's used it effectively somewhere. But most of the time, it just means your allies are going to take more damage instead. Command is great. As of patch 9, they added some extra options for command. We can't see them here. It just says command halt. I will show you this later because command is a very powerful spell. It says it requires concentration. It doesn't really. Expeditious Retreat. I think this is a bit of a waste on a Warlock because we don't get to know very many spells whatsoever. It grants you dash as a bonus action. That's okay, but as one of your spells known, it's just not probably going to be your best choice. Hellish Rebuke, this is nice. This gives you an opportunity to deal out damage on your when it's not your turn, when you use your reaction, and that's quite powerful. There aren't many ways of dealing damage with your reaction outside of opportunity attacks and riposte for the Battlemaster, but this obviously does require you to be hit, but it's nice to have it as an option. And Hex, this is where we get more damage. This is probably, if you want to be dealing damage with your Warlock, this is where your concentration is going to be. It takes a bonus action to cast, and if you hit someone with an attack roll, which Eldritch Blast uses an attack roll, it deals an extra 1d6 necrotic damage. The downside, this changed in patch 9, is you need to keep your concentration the whole time. It used to be, after you killed an enemy, you stopped concentrating on it but had the ability to recast it. But they've changed that. They've made it so you need concentration even outside of combat, so you have to be extra careful. Protection from evil and goods. There's not a huge number of uses for this. Going back to the same kind of argument as Expeditious Retreat, we only got 2 spells at the beginning. We don't get to know very many spells. And unless you know you're going to get loads of use out of this, it's not the best thing to use. So we can't be charmed or frightened, which is nice, right? It's bad when that happens. And there's a couple of places where we can use it outside of combat, but it requires concentration. I personally wouldn't pick it. And Witch Bolt, this does not scale well at all with your level. Most of these other spells scale quite well with your level. But Witch Bolt doesn't. If you've got a wet enemy, then yes, this can be good. But you're usually better off just using Eldritch Blast and Hex. For me personally, I pretty much always take Hex at level 1. I would probably take Command nowadays as well. And I'm going to go look at the other subclass now as well, the Great Old One, and we can see the spells change. Essentially, we get access to these 2 spells. Dissonant Whispers, which is kind of a nice single target spell. You do 3d6 psychic damage if they fail a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail that throw, they're also frightened, which kind of roots them in place and they get disadvantage on their ability checks. It used to be when enemies were frightened in previous patches that they would run away and you get opportunity attacks. That doesn't happen anymore. That is the fear condition. And we also get Tasha's Hideous Laughter. I'm not the biggest fan of this spell because there's so many chances for the enemies to break out of the spell. And I'd rather be concentrating on Hex, I think. But they also get their subclass feature, Mortal Reminder. When you land a critical hit against a creature, that creature and any nearby enemies are frightened. That's pretty cool. But it's on a critical hit. Without advantage, that's 5% of your attacks. Assuming you're doing attack rolls, that's not actually very often it's going to happen. If you can give yourself advantage much more often, then yes, your chances go up, and perhaps this would be better. Right, we're going to move on to race now. So what we're looking for are races that give us charisma. As I've mentioned in my other guide videos, of course, you can build any character almost any way. You can build a Warlock without having a high charisma. You can make a melee Warlock. Now, but as of patch 9, and since we've got access to level 5, that's a bit less tenable because at level 5, Eldritch Blast sends out 2 beams instead of just a single beam, and you can only do 1 attack. But you can make a melee Warlock. You can make a Warlock that doesn't use Eldritch Blast, so maybe you don't need your charisma as high. It's perfectly fine. But I am going to be focused on the charisma-based classes because they make the better kind of traditional type of Warlocks. So elves, well, high elves and wood elves are out. Tieflings, right, they've got a +2 to charisma. And one thing that Tieflings have, which we don't get to see on this level up screen, or we get to see one of the spells. They get the Thaumaturgy cantrip, the Asmodeus Tiefling. At level 3, they also get Hellish Rebuke, which they can cast once per long rest. And at level 5, they'll get Darkness, again once per long rest, both of which are Warlock spells. So if you don't want to use one of your spells known for Hellish Rebuke or Darkness, and you like those spells, Asmodeus Tiefling's probably for you, but do bear in mind you can only cast those once per long rest, plus we can get a bonus to some charisma checks, being Intimidation and Performance. We do also get, I didn't mention it, Intelligence +1. It's not so, it's fine for some skills, and that's all we're going to get from it. That's not so important. And we get resistance to fire damage, which is kind of common. Enemies do throw alchemists' fires, they have fire arrows, they do have some fire spells, so it's a pretty good type of damage to be resistant to. We get 40 feet of dark vision. Mephistopheles Tieflings, kind of similar in terms of the stats, like the bonuses, but the spells are different. So we get Mage Hand. I don't care that much about Mage Hand. If I have it, I will use it sometimes, but it requires concentration, which you might be using for Hex anyway. At level 3, you get Burning Hands. Nice, that again is part of the Warlock spell list. And at level 5, you get Flame Blade. So if you're going for a more melee type of Warlock, perhaps actually Flame Blade is for you. This you might want for Mephistopheles Tieflings. And Zariel Tieflings get Strength +1 instead of Intelligence. They also get Thaumaturgy at level 1, just like Asmodeus Tieflings. And then at level 3, they get Searing Smite, and level 5, Branding Smite. So if you want very much a melee type of Warlock, this is probably the one for you, because you're going to be able to smite some enemies. Not the same ways that Paladins know it's not Divine Smite, but the actual spells called Smite. And we get the Strength +1, which might help you with any weapon that you're wielding. Drow, ooh, perhaps one of my favourite races for Warlocks because we get Dexterity +2 and Charisma +1. It does mean our Charisma is going to be 16 maximum at level 1, but we get this Dexterity +2, so our armor class is going to be higher. We get Proficiency in Perception, and then we get Proficiency in Rapier, Short Sword, and Hand Crossbow. The Rapier and Short Sword, not so fussed about. There are some okay short swords and rapiers. I mean, Nia's rapier, but that's the end of early access, really. But it's this hand crossbow proficiency, because if you've hexed someone, you can dual wield hand crossbows, and that attack can also apply damage from hex, so like on a second turn. And if you've got a spare bonus action, you can use a hand crossbow. Really like it. And superior dark vision. You can see in the dark up to 80 feet. And the range of it Eldritch Blast is 60 feet, so other races that have dark vision, or most other races that have dark vision, is limited to 40 feet, which means outside of that 40 feet, you're going to have disadvantage if it's dark. Drow will be fine, because they've got 80 feet of dark vision. Humans I would probably avoid. I mean, it's nice to have the Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom, but compared to Drow... Oh, also, now that I'm here, completely forgot, we get Dancing Lights at level 1. At level 3, we get Fairy Fire. This is a cool support spell. It's really quite good. And these spells are based off your Charisma modifier. And then at level 5, you also get Darkness, just like the Tiefling. It's really, really good there. Githyanki, unless you're doing some sort of melee kind of Warlock that doesn't use Charisma very much, probably avoid it. But we do get some nice proficiencies here. At level 3 we get Jump, and level 5 we get Misty Step, which are actually two very useful spells. Dwarves, similar to the Githyanki really, unless you're making a melee sort of character for melee Warlock, I would avoid them. There's no Charisma bonus here, but we get some armor and weapon proficiencies. Half Elf, right. Right, you get Charisma +2, awesome. And we get to pick 2 more ability scores to improve by +1. I probably would go Dexterity and Constitution to help out with your armor class and your hit points. Like, why wouldn't you? Then you do get the choice for Cantrip for the high half elf, but then these are based on your intelligence modifier. But if you're going to choose this, you could perhaps pick Friends and then pick another Warlock Cantrip instead. Your intelligence modifier doesn't actually affect Friends. Light or something. Then we got the Wood half elf. We're faster and have proficiency in stealth. Drow half elf is quite powerful. We don't get the weapon proficiencies, but we do still get the spells for us, which is pretty cool. Halfling, one of the halflings has Charisma +1. No dark vision, which is a bit sad. And their movement speed is 25 feet, a bit less than the usual 30. Got lucky and brave, which can be helpful, but the other halfling just has constitution, and gnomes have no bonus to charisma, so I would generally avoid gnomes. Your abilities, you don't get access to many of my own preferred abilities. Personally, I quite like having acrobatics, sleight of hand, maybe stealth and athletics, because they're useful in combat or stealing and outside of combat. So you want to pick an origin, a background that fits your playstyle, what you want. I would probably go for something maybe like Outlander for athletics, maybe Criminal. Having some of the charisma-based skills is helpful because you're going to be generally having a high charisma anyway. Maybe Charlatan. And then it comes to ability scores. Oh, it's already set up quite nicely. So going with the stereotypical Warlock, you want a high charisma. It's going to affect your spells. It's going to help with the skill checks. It's all good. And then pump up Dexterity and Constitution to whatever you can. So you have more hit points and you have a better armor class. And then you got some things left over with, unless you're doing lots of skill checks with your Warlock, you can probably put that down to 8. As I've said in many of my other guide videos, having a high strength is my own personal preference, some sort of quality of life, or put your wisdom up a bit. This helps with your saving throws against some of the nasty control spells. Right, and one other thing I forgot to say much earlier is we have wisdom saving throw proficiency, which is very nice, and charisma saving throw proficiency. The wisdom saving throw proficiency is nice, like I said, because it helps you save your character against the nasty control spells like hold person or something that makes you feared, frightened. It's nice to have a wisdom saving throw proficiency, basically. Alright, so I'm going to jump in. I'm going to create my own Warlock and also use Will as a model for leveling up Warlocks. One of the great things about Warlocks is that at level 2, we get access to Eldritch Invocations, so it's a way of customizing our class. Not many classes get this much customization, to be honest. It's one of the reasons why people do like Warlocks. So we get to pick 2. Now, I've already mentioned that your damage is probably going to be coming from Eldritch Blast. To top up that damage, you can pick Agonizing Blast, so when you cast it, you add your Charisma modifier to the damage it deals. So currently, this Warlock that I created has got a +3 to Charisma. So if I pick this Invocation, which I will, it means Eldritch Blast, instead of doing 1d10 damage, does 1d10 +3. And that's amazing. This is kind of why it makes it a bit like a martial. The damage is calculated in the way that a regular attack would work now, because we've got our Charisma modifier added to the damage. Armor of Shadows, you can cast Mage Armor on yourself at will without expending a spell slot. Unless you've got some robe you really want to be wearing, you're probably better off just using leather armor, light armor, rather than using one of your 2 invocations on this. But if you want to wear like the Robe of Poison, then this would be a good choice, because you get to cast it at will. You can only cast it on yourself. You can't cast it on other people. Beast Speech gives you speak with animals, which is good, except, I I mean, the spell itself is great, but you can just buy potions of animal speaking. Barbarians can get this, gnomes have this. I would say instead of using one of your invocations on this, try and find another way for it. Regarding influence, gives us deception and persuasion proficiency, which is, it's okay, but this does not stack with any proficiency you already have. I've seen several people ask before, if I take deception proficiency at character creation and then take guarding influence for my Eldritch Invocation, does it stack? Do I get expertise? No, you don't. You basically waste your invocation, or you waste your choice of a skill proficiency. Considering we can have friends, we can have enhanced ability, guidance, I would usually not pick this. I would just get through my skill checks other ways. Again, because we've only got 2 choices. And if you want your Warlock to be doing a decent amount of damage, you're probably going to pick Agonizing Blast. Devil's Sight. This gives you the ability to see in darkness, both magical and non-magical, up to a distance of 80 feet. And so this is better than your normal dark vision, which is only up to 60 feet. And we can see in non-magical darkness. I did create a video at the beginning of patch 9 to show how this doesn't work perfectly with the darkness spell, that we can't cast out of darkness even with Devil's Sight, but you can see within the darkness itself. You could have a melee warlock going around or shooting people from within the darkness spell. I've got Will on my team. I will probably give him Devil's Sight since he's a human. He doesn't have dark vision anyway. Fiendish Vigor. This allows you to cast False Life on yourself at will at level 1 without expending a spell slot. It says False Life grants you 5 temporary hit points. It's actually 7. I don't know why that's changed in patch 9, this description here, but it is still actually 7 hit points. As of patch 9, since we're still in the early levels, this is quite good. It's a free 7 hit points for every battle. There's, that is actually really, really good. However, past patch 9, once we get to higher and higher levels, that 7 hit points becomes less and less important, like less of a percentage of your overall hit points, but this is a good choice. Mask of Many Faces. You can cast Disguise Self at will without expending a spell slot. That's pretty awesome. Not having to use a spell slot is what makes this very good. So if you want to go around as a Githyanki, or this character's already a drow, or half drow anyway, maybe you want to turn into a short race, because there are some places you can get to as a short race. This would be useful for you. Repelling Blast, this is another favourite of mine. Not only can we make our Eldritch Blast do more damage, we can enhance it in other ways. We can give it Repelling Blast, so when you hit a creature, you can push the creature up to 15 feet from you. That's amazing, you're knocking people off the sides. Very often if I'm making Warlocks, I find it very hard not to pick Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast at level 2 because there's such good invocations for your Warlock. E for 5 Fates, this is my least favourite one. So once per long rest, you can cast Bane using a Warlock spell slot. So we're using one of our invocations to cast Bane once per long rest, and it uses a spell slot. I mean, I've said that again, but I just want to kind of reiterate. We've got Fiendish Vigor, Disguise Self, or effectively Mage Armor that we can cast unlimited times in a long rest, and Beast Speech, we only need to cast it once. Whereas this, we can just do it once per long rest. I think it's a massive waste. Get another class to do it. There's nothing particularly wrong with the spell Bane. I prefer Bless over it, but it can really, really help. The fact you can only do it once per long rest really, I think, lets this down. For this Warlock, I'm going to pick Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast, and actually for Will, I'm going to pick Agonizing Blast and Devil's Sight. So also at level 2, we get to pick a new spell to add to our repertoire. I'm going to pick Hellish Rebuke. And if you want to, as we've seen with other classes, as we level up, we can replace spells if we want to. So maybe I don't want Dissonant Whispers, and I do want Arms of Hate. No, I actually don't. I'm going to leave it as it is. But you can swap spells around at level up. At Warlock level 3, we get more hit points, improved Warlock spells. Most of your Warlock spells have become stronger. What this means is when you cast a spell using a Warlock spell slot, it will always be cast now at level 2, now that we are character level 3. So for example, here I've got Hellish Rebuke. It will now be cast at level 2, not level 3, every time I cast it. There's no choice. It has to be cast at level 2. We get a Pact boon. Now, currently in Early Access, Patch 9, all of Early Access, we've only ever had one Pact. There is more than one Pact in 5th edition. However, this is our only choice, so we can cast Find Familiar without using a spell slot, but we get 2 extra uses of Find Familiar. We get Find Familiar Imp and Find Familiar Quasit. I would say, with Pact of the Chain, you're going to be summoning either the Imp or the Quasit. There's nothing particularly wrong with the other familiars. I'm not going to go through them. If you really want to get more information on them, go for my Ranger video where I went over the 5 familiar choices, because it's the same choices. And then we could get to pick a level 2 spell. And then there's a whole bunch of spells. And I find it quite hard to choose a spell, because I only get to choose one spell here. Now, Cloud of Daggers is great. It causes damage when we cast it, and on the creature's next turn. Crown of Madness doesn't seem to work very well. Sometimes if the enemy can still reach you, like they can throw something at you, they can get in range of you, they still come and attack you instead of the nearest creature. It doesn't really work as it's supposed to. Darkness, well, I've already done a video like I said before, can kind of work well with Devil's Sight, but it requires concentration. Without Devil's Sight, I would avoid it. With Devil's Sight, you can use it, but you have to be close to the enemy. Detect Thoughts, I think just because we don't get very many choices of spells, I would leave Detect Thoughts to a wizard, because they can learn it. We only get to pick one of these. Hold Person is good. If we can cast this, and when we cast this at level 3, we can actually hold 2 people potentially. Invisibility only lasts 10 turns now. Probably isn't one of my picks anymore. I always kind of like to have it just someone's ready to cast Invisibility. Mirror Image, unless you're making a melee warlock, you can kind of keep them at range. I wouldn't worry too much about Mirror Image. Misty Step is always good to have, but we can get a necklace that gives us Misty Step. Grave Enfeeblement, I've never had a huge amount of use out of this because it requires concentration and the target deals half damage with weapon attacks. Using strength weapon attacks, some enemies, I don't know, Minotaurs, the Bulette, even Grim don't actually use weapons, so it doesn't even help with some of the nastier enemies out there. Phantasmal Force, really not that great. The one good thing about it is it's an intelligence saving throw, and enemies don't have as high intelligence as maybe some of the other stats. It does 1d6 damage a turn, and each time it takes damage from another source, the damage type of the Phantasmal Force changes to that damage type. This kind of sounds cool, but at the end of the day, it's just 1d6 damage. I mean, sure, maybe on Grim, you cast it and you get some bludgeoning damage on him. It'll do 2d6 damage. Just for 1d6 damage a turn, I'd much rather just cast Hex, since it's concentration as well. Shatter. Shatter's good, it's an AoE that doesn't require concentration. It's nice to have a Warlock with Shatter, not just Gale or a Wizard. And lastly, Silence. Silence has some out of combat uses, actually, such as with the Harpies and with True Soul Gurt, if people are trying to make a noise around the drums. So this is more of an out of combat thing. If you cast it in combat, enemies can and do walk outside the aura. You can't move the aura around, so it's kind of a bit Makes you immune to thunder damage. The enemies don't do much thunder damage, to be honest. My usual picks are Cloud of Daggers, Shatter, Misty Step, and Hold Person. I'm gonna go with Shatter because I've already got a concentration spell, and we can replace a spell. And you can, maybe I haven't actually used Dissonant Whispers, you can replace a level 1 spell with a level 2 spell. Maybe I want Misty Step instead. And as a Drow half elf here, I get Fairy Fire, which is great. Again, it requires concentration. It's once per long rest, so I can't use it every battle or anything. It's still nice to have this spell. As a Fiend Warlock, we also get access to Blindness and Scorching Ray. I would suggest that Scorching Ray that goes quite well with Hex because each ray can proc the extra Hex damage, so effectively each ray becomes 3d6 damage, 2d6 fire and 1d6 necrotic damage. Blindness isn't so bad. Magically blind an enemy creature. The main downside to it is that it requires a constitution saving throw, and as I've said before, enemies are quite good at that. But if you can make an enemy bleeding from a spiked bulb or from lacerate or something, they get disadvantage on that constitution saving throw. What does blindness do? Well, it makes the enemy have disadvantage on their attack rolls, and all attack rolls against the enemy have advantage. It's pretty good. I'm going to actually take both of these. They're unique to the Fiend Warlock. At level 4, we can pick another cantrip out of this choice remaining. I'm going to go with Minor Illusion. I've already talked about the cantrips. I don't think it's a great choice of cantrips, especially when we've got Eldritch Blast. Pick another spell. You don't have to pick a spell from the level 2 spells. You can pick a level 1 spell if you wish. This time I'm going to go for Hold Person. Yeah, I'll go with Hold Person. Then we get our Ability Score Improvement or Feat. Now, since I picked a half elf, I made the Charisma 17. I'm going to make this up to 19. I'll show you why later. And in fact, I'll go through the feats with Will for 2 reasons. 1, you've always got the opportunity to have him in your party, and 2, it's a bit more interesting to look at some of the feats on him compared to this Warlock because of his stats. So the reason Will is a little bit different is because he's got Dexterity and Constitution on odd numbers. I mean, I guess you could put up Dexterity and Constitution by 1 each. That'll help him survive, have a higher armor class, more hit points, better Constitution saving throws, and so on. I want to look through some of these feats. Now, we can take Magic Initiate Bard because the spellcasting modifier for Bards is Charisma. But I would argue that for the cantrips, everything's got to compete with Eldritch Blast, with Agonizing Blast. So Vicious Mockery, when we've got Eldritch Blast doing 1d10 plus Charisma modifier damage, Vicious Mockery just looks a little bit lacking. Obviously it has the debuff, which is great, but as a Warlock you're probably going to pick Eldritch Blast. So we pick some of these spells are quite similar to the Warlock spells. I probably wouldn't pick this. And we get to cast the spell once per day, once per long rest, and some of these are on the Warlock spell list. He's a Fiend Warlock, he's not great old on Warlocks, he doesn't actually have access to Dissonant Whispers. Maybe I want to take it. Maybe you want to have Heroism. Maybe I want your Warlock to have a backup healing words, but remember we can only cast these once per day. Another class that uses Charisma for its spellcasting is a Sorceress, so maybe you want access to different attacking cantrips. Maybe you want to have Shock and Grasp in case you're a melee and you want an AoE cantrip. You want Acid Splash, or maybe you want Rare Frost because you like slowing people down, or Firebolt because you want some fire, so you can have other cantrips. And then we got these spells. Again, we can do it once per day, so you've got to pick very carefully. Maybe want Chromatic Orb for utility. We can get some of these, like False Life, Disguise Self, and Mage Armor using an Invocation. I probably wouldn't use my ability score increase for one of these 3 spells if you really want to cast them. And maybe you just want another couple of Warlock cantrips. I personally wouldn't, but maybe you do. But again, if you cast these, you can do it once per day. So if you want to increase your utility or spread of magic, pick one of the magic initiates. Mobile will be useful for most characters. I've said this in almost every video. Now, just like with the Starion from my Rogue video, Will in particular actually does benefit quite a lot from moderately armored, because this dexterity goes up to, well, goes up by +1, which means it goes up to 14, which rounds it off, gets us a +2 modifier to dexterity. Brilliant. And then we are also proficient with medium armor and shields. The thing is, we're almost certainly not going to be dual wielding, because we're probably going to be using Eldritch Blast for our damage. So it doesn't matter that we're not going to be able to dual wield some light weapons that we wouldn't be dual wielding anyway. So I do see some people take this feat for will, and it's a good choice. It is a good choice. For these others, I probably wouldn't. Perform is not that important. It does get us a +1 to charisma, so if you've got an odd number and you don't want to use +2 charisma, maybe you want musical instrument proficiency, this is the only way, I think, the only feat currently, kind of half feat, that gives us +1 in charisma. Shield Master, well, we're not proficient with shields anyway. Skilled, I think it's a bit of a waste of a feat to pick skilled compared to some of the other options we have. Tough, for will in particular, I'd probably just do dexterity and constitution rather than tough. And Weapon Master, we're probably going to be using Eldritch Blast. There's no real need to pick Weapon Master, not really. Personally, most of the time, I will probably be putting charisma up on Warlocks, because it's not just about Eldritch Blast, it's like all your spells as well. The attack rolls are higher, the DC of the saving throws is higher, which means your spells work more often. But I am going to pick moderately armor just to show you what we can do, and potentially you can have will in any of your parties. And lastly, we come to level 5. It doesn't tell us here, but our spell slots are now cast at level 3 instead of level 2, and that's all spells are cast at level 3. Even if it's a level 1 spell originally, it will be cast at level 3. And we get to pick another Invocation. So we've got the same choices as before, plus 2 new ones. We've got one with Shadows. Vanish into the darkness and become invisible. Ends early if you attack, cast another spell, take an action, or take damage. Sounds amazing. That sounds like I can cast invisibility at will and not have to worry about it. What isn't told to us in this description, and it's an awful description for this, is as soon as you move, you lose this. It doesn't say it. It really needs to say it down here, because it makes it sound a lot more powerful than it is. I will take it. Actually, I'll take it with will. It doesn't matter. I'll take it with will. The other invocation we get is you learn how to cast Bestow Curse. Now notice the difference between this and Thief of 5 Fates. Once per long rest, you can cast Bane using a Warlock spell slot. Here, you learn how to cast Bestow Curse. This still does use a Warlock spell slot. It doesn't say it here, but I promise you it does. We can cast this 6 times if we want in the day. Whereas Thief of 5 Fates, we're stuck at once, and it's just a level 1 spell. It's not like the most powerful spell or anything. I'll take maybe the Sign of Ill Omen on my other Warlock. I'll take one with Shadows. It's not exactly the worst thing, but just compared to the description, it's just not that great. Basically, it's good to hide in combat, and that's it. And then we get to pick one more spell. So we've got a unique Warlock spell here, Hunger of Hadar. I will take this on one of the Warlocks just to show it off to you because it is unique. So it is concentration. Creates a sphere of cold blackness teeming with an unknown horrors. Creatures starting their turn in the area take 2d6 cold damage, and if they end it there, they possibly take 2d6 acid damage. It is difficult terrain, creatures within are blinded. It's basically mixing together the darkness spell with some damage added to it, to anyone that's inside, not just enemies. So if you go inside this area, you're also going to take damage. Now, Fiend Warlocks get Fireball. It's amazing. Like, we've got another caster who can cast Fireball. Why wouldn't we want it? I would advise if you're a Fiend Warlock. Personally, I think all... it's a running joke in the community, really. Like, all problems in D&D can be solved by Fireball. Anyway, let's look at some of the other spells. Counterspell is a great spell. Unfortunately, I suppose it's the same as most of the other classes. We can only cast this twice per short rest. The counterspell is powerful. It stops enemies from using spells and other abilities, actually. I've used it against a hag before. Fear is a great spell. Makes enemies run away. They become actually fearful, and they drop their weapon, which is amazing because you can go pick up the weapons. Fly, it's okay. I have shown a viewer build, a Warlock build that uses Fly quite heavily. In that situation, it was great, but overall, compared to the other choices we have, Fly just isn't that good because it only lasts 10 turns and it requires concentration. So you're going to be using it in combat. It's not the worst thing, but it's, you know, you can jump, you can Misty Step. Perhaps there are other good choices. Gaseous Form is great for exploring outside of combat because it's just until long rest, and the Gaseous Form can fly. It doesn't tell us, but it can actually fly, just like, well, the spell Fly can let us fly and can help you get through certain spaces like pipes and through jails, like doors, the bars. So for exploration purposes, Gaseous Form is good. For combat, it means your ally can't actually attack. It does make them resistant, which is nice, and they get advantage on constitution, dexterity, and strength saving throws, which is nice. But if you're in gaseous form, you can't actually hurt anyone. I'm going for Haydar, I'm going to take that. Hypnotic Pattern is quite a powerful spell, but it only lasts 2 turns, sadly. And the enemies are hypnotized, so they can't take actions, bonus actions. Basically, they're stuck, standing still. But is removed when taking damage or when helped. So if you've got a group of enemies and you cast it, make sure you focus on one enemy at a time. Remove curse. I've still not found a curse where this actually works on. Perhaps I haven't. I've stopped searching now. Maybe one of you guys know and I've just missed it out. Stinking Cloud is a powerful control spell, so it can create a cloud of gas so nauseating it prevents creatures from taking actions, which means they're basically not going to hurt you, which is great. And Vampiric Touch. Touch an enemy, if you hit them, you regain half as many hit points as the damage they take, which I've shown this in the build video I mentioned already earlier with the viewer build. What actually happens is damage rolled and the healing done are 2 separate rolls currently in the game, and the healing rolled is 3d6 divided by 2 and the damage is 3d6. For 10 turns you can use it again without expending an additional spell slot. This is a bit risky because you have to get into melee range and its concentration. It's 3d6 damage, which is nice, which is good, but it takes your action. Most of the time I'd probably rather just cast Eldritch Blast. One thing that I will show you is that Eldritch Blast now has 2 beams at level 5. Alright, I'm going to replace, I don't know why we get 2 Cloud of Daggers here. What do I want? I wanted to take Fireball. Instead of Cloud of Daggers, I'm going to take Fireball. And then with the other Warlock, I'll take Sign of Ill Omen, and I'll pick their spell in a second. So unfortunately, the Great Old One Warlock doesn't actually have as many spells as the Fiend Warlock. They haven't added the kind of spells we should get the choice of here. I can't tell you why, I don't really know. Let's have Fear, and let's have Fear and Hypnotic Pattern. Because I am a Drow half-elf, I do get Darkness also once per long rest. So I've got Will here. First of all, there's one with shadows. The area must be lightly or heavily obscured. Okay, well if we press shift, you can see next to the cursor, there's like a half sun, half moon, well half sun icon there. So I can cast one with shadows. Cool, I'm invisible. I can hide, cool. I come out of invisibility. What? Right, again. Okay, I'm invisible, nice. Jump, still invisible. This shouldn't really be happening. But this is one way to get around. It's a bit tedious. Maybe you could cast Jump on him with another character, and you could jump around while invisible. That will probably get changed and patched. But as of patch 9, as of the making of this video, we can go invisible and we can jump around. Obviously in combat, it requires your bonus action to jump, and then you can't move any further from there. We should also be able to teleport around, actually, with Misty Step, for example, and still stay invisible. And then if we go to Deceptive, she now just has the option to cast Stow Curse. Yeah, next up will be some items, and then we'll look at how the spells work in combat. So it's time to look at the items, and Warlocks don't really need a huge number of very specific items, although there's one particular piece of armor I would say is probably the best for them. So it's light armor, spider silk armor. It comes from Minthara. It's got an armor class of 12, which is fairly decent for light armor. There's only one light armor better than this in terms of armor class, which is studded leather armor plus 1, which has an armor class of 13. It gives stealth plus 1, which is fine, but the massive thing it gives us, the bonus it has, advantage on constitution saving throws, which is massive because you will be having concentration checks to keep up hex. And this gives you advantage, which really, really helps. So other items I've picked up along the way, which perhaps you don't need. Like I said, there aren't massive numbers of items that really benefit Warlocks in terms of like the damage they do and stuff. I picked up the Shadow of Menzo Baranza, and basically what I've done is picked up a bunch of items that give my Warlock different spells to use. So this is effectively invisibility, which I've got, well, it's shrouded in shadow. It's not actually said to be invisibility, but it is invisibility. Amulet of Misty Step, which, well, gives Misty Step. Ring of Poison Resistance. Guiding Light gives the light cantrip. We could have Crusher's Ring in here if we wanted to move faster. I've picked up the Gloves of Power. I got branded. I don't particularly like showing off the items that require you to be branded because maybe you don't want to be branded. This doesn't really work well with Eldritch Blast, but it does work with the hand crossbows. Now, I've given her hand crossbows, even though she's not proficient with them, just to give her something else to do with a bonus action. It's not like the greatest chance to hit. For example, if I just try and hit, oh, it's got disadvantage. If I try and get Sovereign Sports, 50% chance. If you've got a spare bonus action, it's kind of like, well, why not? If this had been just a drow, not a half-elf drow, then they would be proficient. It'd be a bit better. Also picked up Mistress Grace from the Arcane Tower, just because, yeah, it's nice to be able to cast Featherfall. But to be honest, a lot of these could be on any character. And lastly, the Spell Sparkler, which could be good for Gale. We're going to be sending out a lot of Eldritch Blasts, and we can use Shatter, which helps us get more lightning charges, but I didn't want to focus on the whole lightning charge thing. With Will, since I gave him moderately armored, so he's proficient with medium armor, I've given him some Scale Mail plus 1. Boots of Striding just because it's nice to have some boots. I mean, like, he's got Crusher's Ring, he's got the Sparks Wall. Haste Helm can be good. It's something you need to be proficient in light armor to wear. It gives you momentum, so a bit of extra movement speed. And kind of interestingly, for weapons, you've got a lot of leeway if you're not using the spell Sparklet. So I've just given him the Club of Hill Giant Strength just because I want him to have a higher strength so we can jump further and carry a bit more. But we could give him the Staff of Arcane Blessing, probably better on Shadowheart or on a Cleric, but could give it to him because we're not really going to be attacking with our melee weapons, so we can pick a weapon that gives us other bonuses. Could give them the Ritual Dagger. Currently this is on Gale, so they can attack with the offhand to get Bless, or they can actually just use this Blood Sacrifice. The Goblin Bane Dagger, if you're fighting goblins still. Goblins have disadvantage against you, but past the Goblin Camp, we don't come across any goblins. Some boots I forgot to mention that are currently also on Gale. The Boots of Speed with your bonus action, but you're probably going to be using your bonus action a lot for Hex. You don't have to use Hex, of course, but it is a good source of damage, though. And since he's proficient in shields, I could give him the Absolute's Warboard, perhaps. But your Warlock might not be proficient in medium armor and shields, so I don't want to focus too much on that. Now, one other thing I've got in my inventory I haven't used yet. This is on my own Warlock, Deceptav. I've got Volo's Ursat's Eye. I stole this from him a long time ago. We can see my Charisma's 19. That's a bit annoying, isn't it? Now, I've seen people say, oh, I don't know how to use Volo's Ursat's Eye. So what I do, just to make sure nothing can go wrong, put it inside my inventory, the character who I want to use it, double click.
Some bloody help.
And there we are. Charisma's gone up to 20, but at the same time, your intelligence goes down by 1. Be careful, you've been warned. Don't use this unless you want to. You can also get this from Volo if you let him into your camp and you follow a certain cutscene where he tries to remove the parasite. And so now I'm going to be blasting away with the Charisma of 20. There we are. My spell attack bonus is +8. Spell save DC is 16. That's actually quite high for level 5. That's really quite high. And so this Warlock, because she's a half drow, has got Dancing Lights here, Fairy Fire, Darkness. And because of some items, we've got Misty Step, Featherfall, although I've already got Misty Stuff anyway. And the thing I didn't show at level 3 also is this Find Familiar option. We got the normal Find Familiar choices. We got the Frog, Crab, Cat, Spider, Raven, and Rat. But we can also have a Quasit. Let's just have a look at them. It's a hit point 7 for most familiars. That's pretty good, actually. And interestingly, they're resistant to fire, lightning, cold, and physical damage, which is cool. And they have got a special ability called Scare. Lash at a creature to frighten it, which is fine. It takes an action, but once per short rest. You can't just spam this in combat. You can do it once in combat, essentially. Then you need to short rest to get it back. And that's okay. The scaring, in some situations, can be good, especially if there's a low number of enemies. And interestingly, they can turn invisible, and they can go and explore for you. What doesn't happen anymore, which you used to be able to do, is we cannot go around with an invisible familiar and pick up waypoints. We used to be able to send an invisible familiar around and, yeah, get waypoints so we can skip lots of the map. And there was one other option up here. The Imp, this is my personal favourite. Why is the Imp my favourite? Well, we can see, first of all, it's already got more hit points. 10 instead of 7, and it's resistant to the same damage. Now it doesn't have the scare ability. What it does have, 2 things. It's got the ability to fly, so that makes exploring even easier, far easier, and getting around any sort of combat. And also the sting ability, which does 1d4 plus 3, and if they fail a constitution saving throw, 1d6 poison damage. It's not amazing, but I have found that occasionally my Imp is the MVP, and it can tank quite well because it's resistant to physical damage. So against a lot of enemies, this is really 20 hit points. And what you can do, which I don't have ready, you can cast Aid. This goes for all familiars, it's not just the Imp. It goes up to 15 hit points. And again, we're resistant to most, not all, but most types of damage that we see in the game currently. That's almost 30 hit points. The Imp can be really quite tanky, considering you can, after a combat, just resummon. I'm not going to because I'd lose the aid, the extra 5 hit points here, but you can just resummon. So next up, I will go and show you how we're actually going to win battles. So I was very lucky, found myself in this fight, teleported here, and I managed to have my whole party beat initiative of the enemy. That's quite rare. Now, I'm going to get Shadowheart to use the Staff of Arcane Blessing, which you might give to a Warlock. I have done it on Wheel before. Because this Bless is a special Bless. Mystery's Blessing. And I want to show this because people often misunderstand this, and it's not their fault because the description isn't written very well at all. So we have normal Bless, right, 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws, Mistress Blessing, additional 1d4 to saving throws and weapon attack rolls, an additional 2d4 to spell attack rolls. What this ends up meaning is that your spell attack rolls have plus 2d4, not 3d4. I've seen several people argue before. that from the description, it means we have 3d4, which isn't the case. Whew, I can just about see the hook horror. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cast Hex. Now, we've got 6 choices, and I really want to make this clear, because even this last week, there was someone who'd played for like 1,000 hours on Reddit, and was still kind of confused about the difference between checks and saving throws. During combat, there are so few checks. When it says checks, what it means is the use of these skills here. The one skill that enemies might use is athletics if they try and push you. Otherwise, no skills are used. When we stealth, the DC is 10. It's just 10. It isn't dependent on their wisdom like in tabletop. We're not rolling against their perception. The only time that the enemies might use this really is strength athletics to shove, and that's it. So only useful one in combat is to use strength. It does not affect any saving throws. It doesn't help your spells hit more often. So we've got 2 beams because we're level 5. I've got Repelling Blast going as well. And we just did 34 damage. Both attacks hit. And we can see here, in terms of Mistress Blessing, we've got +2 Bless and +2 from Mistress Blessing. That is 2 on 1d4. And the same thing here, we got +2 and +3. And this +5 comes from the Agonizing Blast. What we also get, we probably shouldn't be getting this. There's probably there's 10 extra damage compared to what we should really be getting. These necrotic damage sources are from Hex. And then what the game is currently doing is adding Agonizing Blast to the damage from Hex. It probably shouldn't be doing that, to be honest, but that's what we currently have in patch 9, which is why I came out to do 34 damage. And I can keep doing that as long as I keep hitting and I can maintain concentration. All right, let's go to Will next. He's our other Warlock. So let's show you Hunger of Hadar, because the only chance to use this is on a Warlock. So we get an area of effect. He needs to concentrate on this. So this will blind the enemies. Or at least they can't see. It doesn't actually tell. Oh yeah, they are blinded. The area is difficult terrain, so it takes them a while to get out. And at the start of their turn, they're going to take some damage. Now he needs to maybe try and hide. So I'm going to skip to their turn. Actually, no, I won't. I'm going to send the imp around somewhere just to be attacked, just to show you it can tank a bit. Oh, that's very brave of Philro. And concentration broken. So it took 6 damage, but enemies will try and jump out. Look at that, the imp has actually survived. That was very lucky, really. Attacks from 2 hook horrors, no less. Now, to get these enemies back into Hunger of Hadar, I'd have to maybe shoot them back in effectively with Agonizing Blast or get Thunder Wave or something. It's probably not going to happen, in all honesty. I'm still concentrating on Hex against this one hook horror, so I'm going to keep on focusing against that hook horror. Oops. Succeeded on Constitution saving throw. That Bless and the advantage almost certainly helped. I've got Hellish Rebuke. I forgot I had that on, although I did see this down here. And because this is what I wanted to show earlier, we're using a level 3 Warlock spell slot. So instead of doing 2d10 damage using a level 1 spell slot, I'm going to use a level 3 spell slot. I've got no choice. It has to be a level 3 spell slot. I don't actually want to do that because I'm going to hit with Eldritch Blast well enough anyway. And I maybe want to use another spell. So I'm going to hit with Eldritch Blast twice. And it's just gone. Part of that is the lightning damage. You've got 1 extra lightning damage, which also procs the Agonizing Blast, which is, again, over the top. This really shouldn't be happening. So currently in patch 9, if you do give yourself lightning charges and Agonizing Blast, you will be doing a lot of damage. This is 5, by the way, in case you missed it earlier, because my charisma is now 20, and I've got a +5. It says +4, it's +1d4 from Bless. A +5 to my charisma. So now I've got a bonus action. I could maybe reapply Hex, but there's not much point in doing so. I can do that next turn. Since I've got some lightning charges, I can try and use my offhand attack, especially against this dude, who's not very well armored. And because I've got the Gloves of Power, he's now got Bane from the weapon attack. And because I had a lot of lightning charges, I did 5 on 1d8 plus 1 from just having lightning charges. Almost killed him with that. Not super. I would never have actually killed him unless there was a critical hit, I guess. So having hand crossbows, even if you're not proficient with them, can be okay. It's not going to make you do loads more damage or anything, but when you've got a spare bonus action, it's kind of like, why not? And this can go for any character. It's not really to do with Warlocks. So yeah, my Hunger of Hadar has been a bit wasted here. You want to use it in a place that's enclosed. The enemies are going to be stuck inside. Maybe cast Grease inside as well to make them slip up. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to try and, just use 2 against him. There we are. Dark One's Blessing, that's because he took someone to 0 hit points, and he's now got 8 hit points because it's his level of 5 plus his charisma modifier of 3. So it's a bit more tanky now, to be honest. Let's just show you the imp actually. So over to here. Oh, brought another enemy into combat. I was about to try and hide to get advantage. It's not really going to work because I'm out in the open. Gonna try sting. There we are. That was lucky. Their saving throw was pretty bad. They rolled a 6, that's why. But yes, it's a source of some damage. And gonna tank for a bit. Let's just leave Gale. And anytime the enemy misses, that's one less attack against you. And like I said, we can just summon the imp afterwards anyway. It's not the end of the world if the imp goes to 0 hit points. So now it's my next turn. Time to reapply Hex. Gonna try Strength. Ooh, don't want to go that close. We don't actually have to go that close to reapply Hex. Make sure you do click on this icon on the right. Don't cast Hex from here. Must be the reapply Hex. There we are. So my hope here is to push this back into Hunger of Hadar. There we are. So at the beginning of its turn, it's going to take some damage. And look at all of this. It's just crazy because of the agonizing blast. There's no way to know if this is going to stay after patch 9. Probably not, would be my guess. Now, we've got those two there. So what I'm going to try now... And I could just cast Fireball, right? We get the lovely sounds. There's a chance it would kill the hook horror on the right. What I'm going to try now, though, is Command. And just a reminder, these spell slots are level 3. And Command at level 3 actually lets you target more than one creature. So what we're going to do, we're going to just try and stop them. This is the original command that we had before. When I highlight the hook horror on the right, actually it highlights the one on the left. Perfect. Worked. The great thing about Command, it is not concentration. So this hook horror is just going to stay there. May as well take an attack. And at the end of its turn, again, took damage. Because of Command, it stayed in place. Now we're going to see if we can get high ground. And again, trying to knock it back into Hunger of Hadar. I don't know if I'm close enough. Yeah, I am. Bit worried I'm getting a bit far away now for Hex. Into Hunger of Hadar. It will take some damage. Will now is just... And also inside the Hunger of Hadar, because they're blinded, we've got advantage against them. He doesn't have Hex up. I don't think he's even got Hex. Oh, he does. But he's concentrating on Hunger of Hadar, which means like, if I use Hex, Hunger of Hadar would go down. I actually think he's out of spell slots anyway. And they keep missing the imp. I feel like my imps are lucky. We're already concentrating on Hex. Eldritch Blast. And again, it's quite repetitive, but it's very effective. Boom. Don't stop concentrating on Hex. So we use both spell slots, take a short rest, and they come back. Today must be my lucky day because I've got my whole team going first again. I want to show off Fear here. Now these three aren't quite in the right position. Fear is an AoE, but it's a cone that spreads out. I should probably get behind Corsair Greymon, so I'm going to Misty Step behind. Try and avoid any opportunity attacks. There we are. Only targets enemies, which is lovely. Oh, it works on all three of them. And part of that is because her spell save DC is 16. And so now they've all dropped their weapons. They can go around picking them up, making sure they're not dangerous. And they're also going to try and run away. So I should set up all of my party next to one of them to try and get opportunity attacks against all of them. And so on their turn, obviously you would normally be attacking. Yeah. Everyone gets the opportunity attacks. We're not very good with our weapons, which is why we didn't hit very many of them. And it's back to our turn. I could... I mean... Wouldn't be a very good guide if I didn't actually show off Fireball at least once. Nah. And then back to this Warlock. I am concentrating on Fear. It's just going to be for just two more turns. They're going to keep running, which is amazing. And instead, what other spells could I cast? I've got these. I'm just going to cast Shatter. Remember, this is a level 3 spell slot, so actually it's 4d8 damage, so the usual 3d8 at level 2. Gone. Now, one thing I haven't showed you so far, because I've got so many abilities here, is the illithid power, tadpole power, which is called Supernatural Attraction, which lets you teleport to another infected creature. So basically your party members, and there are a few people around who are infected, although not really in Grimforge. But the leaders at the Goblin Camp, you could teleport to them if you really wanted to. I generally find this good for getting out of trouble. If your Warlock is somewhere they maybe shouldn't be, and you've got one of your allies somewhere up high, you can use that. Or, say I want everyone to get across a gap, I can give the Amulet of Misty Step to someone else, they teleport across, and then we teleport to them using this ability. I just want to point out this doesn't work with the Imp, because the Imp doesn't have a parasite. it works with all of your party members. This ability will only work with very few characters. You can try and... It's also a way of checking if someone has got a parasite, although the game generally lets you know when you're in conversation with them. But we can see here these Duergars don't have a parasite. So what I'm going to try and do next is keep blasting away with Eldritch Blast and see if I can get some critical hits with this Warlock to show you Mortal Reminder. So the best way to get critical hits, there's two ways of doing it. One, have more attacks, which is why Eldritch Blast at level 5 is good because we get 2 blasts. Secondly, have advantage. You're more likely to roll 20s. But there's no guarantee whatsoever that it's going to work. So I've got advantage, so I'm more likely to get a critical hit. By these two, no critical hit. 1, 2. No critical hit here. 1, 2. I got a critical hit on the wrong person, basically. But there we saw she was frightened because of the critical hits. I don't know if we're going to see it down here. Yeah, we didn't see it, probably because she died. But the range of the frightened ability, the Mortal Reminder, is about 10 feet. It's not really very high. So I'm going to continue my quest in getting a critical hit. And I'm using Scorching Ray here because it shoots out 3 times. And importantly, if I use Eldritch Blast here, I might just knock them off the side, which I don't want to do right now. And so let's go and use Scorching Ray. I am there, so we'll use it against this one.
You attacked someone.
Right. Yeah, that didn't work out. So now we're going to have all of these Duergar coming. I'm going to do my best to get a critical hit, to be honest. Right, this fight is now actually quite a lot more deadly. I've got a lot of enemies coming at me, so I am going to try and finish people off as quickly as I can. I'm hoping this knocks Stone Guard Kerr over the side. It might not. And then aim for that one. It didn't, which is sad, but it still did a fair amount of damage. I've got an offhand attack. I can only hope that that works. Alright, get away from the side. So, very helpfully, we've got Glyph of Warding Sleep. I just hope everyone, at least one person's still asleep by the time it's Deceptav's turn. It might not actually work out because they will wake each other up. Got a Misty Step here. I'm pinned down, so my movement speed is only 20 feet. A more useful spell here might actually be Fear, but I really want to show you Mortal Reminder. This is going to be an automatic critical hit because they're sleeping, and I may as well try and get rid of them because my masters are very dangerous. Always aim for them first if you can. There we are, and we can see these two. The eye, Scrying Eye doesn't really mean much, and Sergeant Thrin are frightened. It's a very small range, and they're only frightened for 1 turn, which isn't really very much. It's a bit disappointing. In these sorts of fights, I really love sending the imps in ahead. This is just to try and soak up any attacks and damage. Kind of use them basically as tanks in a way. So they don't really tank very long or anything, but any attacks not against your characters means another round that you survive for. So what's Will got that's going to help out? And let's show you, try and show you. Lastly, again, I wouldn't normally do this. I'd probably normally just use Fireball to damage these 3 Duergar. I want to show you Blindness. It's cast at level 3, so we can actually affect an additional target if they're within a certain amount of time. We've got a chance. Look at that. Perfect. And it's not concentration. They have now got disadvantage on their attack rolls, and we've got advantage against them. We'll get Gale to help us out with Fireball. Oh, we got one of them at least. Right. Sergeant Thrin. Yeesh. She was frightened for her turn. Doesn't mean she can't cast anything, but it meant she couldn't move. And so maybe I want to get away from Sergeant Thrin, and I've run out of Misty Step, although I do have it as a spell. I can use Supernatural Attraction to maybe go to Will. Like I said earlier, you can use it to get out of trouble. And I've still got 2 spell slots left. Pretty cool. I'd quite like to get rid of Sergeant Thrin one way or another. Let's check out my spells. I could use Fear, as I've already mentioned. But Fear, I mean, it's an AoE. You don't really want to be using a spell slot for a single enemy unless they're particularly dangerous. Will's already used his spell slot, so I was going to try and use Command otherwise. But since he's done that, let's just start off with this. He doesn't have Agonizing Blast. Oh, yes, he does. Sorry, I forgot. He does have Agonizing Blast. Of course he does. He doesn't have Repelling Blast. It does a very good amount of damage. Again, we'll go the Imp just to try and get in the way. I should probably have gone for Thud. Never mind. Oh yes, critical hit. Like I said, my imps basic MVPs. So I will actually use Supernatural Attraction. Don't have to go too far. Just have to get out of the way. Don't want to stand near the edge, that's just a general thing.
With haste.
Back here. I've used my bonus action, so I can't cast Hex. And yeah, the AoE's not going to be good enough for that. Let's just show you Bestow Curse. So what can we do with Bestow Curse? If you want... Sorry, I just realised I was talking about Hex not giving disadvantage on saving throws. It's Bestow Curse is what you want if you want to do that. Although you do need to have maintain concentration. So what I'm going to go for... Yeah, Curse a creature with a touch. It fills with dread, possibly skipping a turn. Ah, melee at range. That's my own fault. So I've gone round and around. It was a 70% chance to work. It wasn't 100%. That's a bit sad. But that's always going to be the case with those sorts of spells. That just sorts that out. Alright, there's only one enemy left. Draw. So I think we're going to Misty Step up there. Go blast away, I think. There's not much more to show. So she's got one spell slot left, which the Misty Step here will use her spell slots. So I can't cast Hex. I can't cast Hellish Rebuke. All I can do right now... I say all I can do right now is this. I'm just going to see if I can get Will up there. I don't think I can. Oh, yes I can. Supernatural Attraction. Oh, target's out of sight. That's very sad. Come on, we can see up there. She managed to Misty Step up there. So that's a bit sad. Right, no. What I was going to do maybe was cast Fairy Fire, but it's not going to work out now. I'm just going to attack. Concentration broken. Trying Hunter's Mark again. Oh, ow. Ooh. That was not what I wanted. In fact, what we're probably going to have to do is get this thing down. Oh no. That was a mistake. I'm supposed to press C to hide and then sting. So we're taking damage, taking hits. It's all fine. Ah, there we are. And we're all good. No one's gonna go down this time. So let that be a lesson of just jumping up ahead, getting yourself into trouble. So let me know what you think of Warlocks. I don't think there's much more to show. I've gone through spell lists before, shown you how well Eldritch Blast works. We can be versatile. We've got lots of options with our invocations. What items would you give to your Warlocks? Because I've chosen a few, but apart from maybe Spider Silk Armor and maybe Spell Sparkler, the other items are very much interchangeable. I could maybe have had the Absolute's Talisman on, since she's branded. And when she dealt damage, you could regain some hit points. Also, let me know how you build your Warlocks, what feats you take, what ability scores, what's your favourite race. Thank you very much to my channel members for helping support this channel. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.